I want you to imagine a door that is in front of you. I want you to imagine a door that it means that something in your life is about to change in a significant way. We've all had these moments where we get up to a door, right? And we know that our world's about to change if we go through that door, and we have to make a choice. And I want to talk to you today about one of those doors, but before doing that, I want to bring us back to Daniel chapter 2. Do you remember that chapter in Daniel where Nebuchadnezzar, the king, he is a new king, he's fresh into his reign, and he has a dream. And whether he can't remember the dream or whether he simply just wants to test his seers, he calls his seers and his wise men together and he says, I want you to tell me what I dreamed. And they go, sure, no problem. We do that all the time. Go ahead, give us the dream. And he says, well, actually, I'm not going to give you the dream. I'm going to ask you to give me that dream. And they look at him and they say, no one on earth has ever asked their seers or wise men to do such a thing. And so he pronounces that he's going to kill them all. And the commander of the army comes to Daniel and his three friends, because they weren't important enough to be in that room at that moment, but they were seers, so they were guilty by association. And he says, well, hey, this is what's going to happen to you. And Daniel says, oh, wait a second. Let me go talk to the king. I think I can help. And we know what he was thinking at that moment. He was thinking that God would deliver him if it was his will and help him in that way. So imagine Daniel as he's walking up to the doorway to the king's chambers, to the king's the throne room, knowing that the minute he steps into that room, his world will never be the same, right? And we're standing in a similar moment right now as it has to do with AI. We're standing at that door. I saw all your hands raised. We're all playing with it. We're imagining it. We've got tools that are using it. And we're standing there, we're going, what is it going to be like if we go through that door? So it's important for us to think about, how do we make decisions in our culture about things like AI? I'd like to remind you of someone named Robert Oppenheimer. How many people have heard his name? He helped develop the atom bomb, right? Nuclear power. Of course, it's had many good uses. Many of our cities are powered by it, but obviously also it has led to some dramatic consequences. He had a little test that he used. He said, when you see something that is technically sweet, you go ahead and do it. That was his criteria, and we ended up with the atom bomb, right? Now, in Robert Oppenheimer's days, and in the last century or two, we have had, alongside this desire for progress and this pushing forward into the unknown, we've also had a moral framework that in the United States and in Western Europe is a Judeo-Christian framework, right? So tugging against this whatever you do that's sweet do was also this moral framework saying, should we do it? And what are the consequences? And how will it impact our lives, our families, et cetera, right? Today, we don't have much of that moral framework left in our country and in many parts of the world. In fact, relative truth is just a part of everyday life for us. And Francis Schaeffer, who was a thought leader in the 20th century, I love this quote from his book, How Shall We Then Live? He said, as my son Frankie put it, humanism has changed the 23rd Psalm. You know, it says, the Lord is my shepherd, right? And now they begin it, I am my shepherd. And then sheep are my shepherd. And then everything is my shepherd. And finally, nothing is my shepherd. And I think the reality today is that many people in a world that is filled with a vacuum, nothing is their shepherd. We have a world full of conflict and polarization. There's going to be some really attractive things about AI being my shepherd. AI is impartial, or so we think, and AI is this tool that maybe they can sort this mess out, and I won't have to. And so we have to remember that as we enter into this door that we're about to enter into, we're not entering it with the same moral foundation that we would have 100 years ago. But as I tell you this, I want to let you know that I'm an optimist about AI. I'm not worried because this is God's kingdom, God's in control, and he's got this. And we can know that if we are willing to do what he asks us to do with his technology, that he's going to bless that work. So what I'd like to do today is, in the frame of caution yet optimism, talk to you about some of the tools, our responses, our postures, and then some conversations I think you need to be having in your organizations. First of all, so there's basically, when you think about AI, there's two basic groupings of issues that we're dealing with today. The first is AI as general intelligence. So intelligence with great power, but it's this general idea of, really the bottom line is it's the question that many people are asking about existential threat. So when Jeffrey Hunton left Google, he's the father of modern AI, he left Google because he had some concerns in this area. And the way that general intelligence will work, for instance, let me give you a really practical example. I can go on ChatGPT today and say, hey, I want to have a meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central Time, and I want people in Lima, Dubai, and London to be at the meeting. What time zone will it be for them? And ChatGPT will give that right back to me. It's very helpful. Well, as we go along and develop this capability, and it gets smarter and smarter, again, it's only a machine, so we need to be careful not to personify it or make it seem like a person. But as we do that, what's going to happen is I'm going to be able to say, you know, I want these 4 people in the meeting. You have access to my calendar. You know the time zones. Please set up the meeting, send the Zoom link, and prepare the notes document for me and have it ready for me when I go into the meeting. And that's the kind of progression that general intelligence will lead to. So we have to be really smart about knowing what are the appropriate ways that that should be done. When is it appropriate to have AI schedule a meeting? When isn't it appropriate? Those are things that we need to be prepared for to answer. The second one is AI as a tool in the hands of good and bad actors. Okay, so AI is a tool, right? So I can, for instance, take an image and I can use AI to do all kinds of cool things with that image and really helpful things. In fact, this image that you have on the screen, that might have been generated by AI and it's helping me with my presentation. That's a wonderful thing. At the same time, in the hands of a bad actor, an image of me can be put onto the floor of the United States Senate, and 3 seconds of my voice can have me say pretty much whatever they want me to say. So that's the tool in the hands of a bad actor. So the question is, how are we going to take these tools that are just tools, and how are we going to use them in a wise way, and how are we going to be aware of ways that they are used that could be harmful? So I'd like to talk for a minute about 2 good news examples, because again, I'm an optimist, and I think God's doing some good things in this day and age, even as we have to be careful. So first of all, Bible translation. SIL, we help people flourish with their language. A key part of that is Bible translation. That's the spiritual intersection that we work in. And right now, we're developing tools that are going to help Bible translators translate the Bible more quickly and effectively. In fact, we've got a tool that does quality assurance. So someone translates the book of Matthew, they run it through our tool, and it gives them a heat map, and it shows them places where they need to go back and do some looking and work. There's some things that may be wrong there, some things they need to check, etc. So there's awesome tools. We're also developing suggestions and commentary tools powered by AI that are going to help translators who haven't had the benefit of years of Bible college to have access to all the stuff that people coming out of Bible colleges and universities in the U.S. have access to. And on the other side, on evangelism, and Yvonne, who is coming on next, this is her area of focus. She works for an organization focused on internet evangelism. But there's amazing tools where we can have chatbots interact with people who are going to internet evangelism websites and find out what their needs are and recognize their language and pivot and then give them materials in that language. The potential to engage hundreds of thousands of more people is huge. So in the face of both the concerns and the potentials, I would say that there are 3 potential responses that people might have. The first, I call it the ideological response. And that's my way is the right way. And what people will do there is they'll come in usually and go, this AI stuff, this won't help me at all. This is something that is only bad, only evil. Or others might have the shiny object syndrome and say, this can do no wrong, right? So we'll have a lot of people out there in the Christian community that we interact with that might take an ideological stance. Then we have people that will take a pragmatic stance. And those people, what they tend to do is they tend to say, hey, whatever it takes to accomplish the goal, right? So if I want to see people come to Jesus, I'll do anything, and they mean anything, to see that happen. Now, we know from Scripture that how we do things is also important, not just what we do. And so this issue of pragmatism, the ends justify the means, is a response that we'll see many people take. But what I'd like to encourage you is to consider a third response. And I call it the practical response. I think we see this in the life of Jesus. Jesus talks, when he talked to the Samaritan woman, or the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, and the rich young ruler, he was working from his values. He was working from truth. But he was being very practical, very actionable in his request of them. And I think that's what we need at this moment. We need values-based action. We don't need ideology. We don't need pragmatism. We need values-based action. So let's go back to Daniel for a minute. What did he do? He's standing at that door, right? He is about to go in and see the king. He goes in, and we don't know what happened there. It doesn't really say. We don't know if he had a long talk, if he just listened to one command and left. But he got information, right? He understood the mind of the king. He understood the emotions of the king. And so he understood his situation. He went away, and the next thing he did was he asked for prayer. He went to his 3 guys, and he said, guys, our life depends on this. Let's pray. And they went to prayer. And this wasn't just a nice little helpful prayer at the beginning or end of a meeting. This was my life depends on it prayer. And I think in some cases, we need to be thinking that way about the prayers around this topic, because there's some implications that are so disruptive for us that if our prayer life isn't that deep, we will not be as discerning as we need to be. We will not have the opportunities to respond the way God wants us to respond. And finally, when God gave Daniel the answer to the dream, Daniel obeyed. Daniel went and met with the king, no matter what the consequences. He didn't know if the king would like or not like that dream. He didn't know how he would respond. He went and he did what God asked him to do. I think we need to do the same 3 things with AI today. Number 1, we need to understand it. I'm so glad a lot of you were using some of the tools. We need to use the tools. We need to understand, what is this thing? How does it work? Where does it work? What does it do? But then we need to immediately build a discipline of prayer around that understanding. How can we then ask God, God, I see what this tool can do. I see the harm, I see the good. God, what do you want me to do with it? What's the right thing to do with it? And then we need to truly listen to what God tells us and obey that thing. So God may say, in a certain instance, don't use AI for that, right? Especially as it comes to real people and real situations. He may say, that is something I don't want you to use AI for. It may take great courage for you not to use AI for something. Something else he may say, absolutely, this is a wonderful use of this cool thing that you humans that I made in my image created. Go for it. And in that case, we need to use it. And we need to use it in creative and strategic ways, because we're made in God's image. We were made to do that, right? So as you go through those responses and that approach, like we saw in Daniel, I would like to propose 4 postures that I think are really, really critical. So first of all, humility. We were just talking backstage a minute ago, and anyone who tells you they know what's going to happen next week with AI is lying to you. Because we're literally learning every day something new that's happening. The world is changing so quickly around this topic that it is going to take a deep and true humility on your part to say, I don't know what's going to happen, but God, I'm listening. I'm ready. I'm ready to hear what you would have to say and what it means for me and the ministry that I work in. Secondly, we need to be doing this together. I would encourage you, if you don't already, put together a little prayer team of people that prays around this topic maybe once a quarter. Bring what you're wrestling with, what you're finding, what you're dealing with, what the issues are. Get with other people. Learn together. Don't just think you'll figure it out on your own or just simply watching the latest YouTube video or whatever. Get in community with other believers and learn how to do this. The third thing is grace. In a disruptive time, it is very challenging as we have our interpersonal relationships. People are going to lose their jobs because of AI. New people are going to get new jobs. The world is going to change in ways that's going to be really scary. It's going to be really exciting. Some people are going to be so happy. Some people are going to be struggling with, should I retire early? I just don't want to deal with all this. All kinds of emotions. It's going to take great grace on your part to wrestle with them in those moments of emotion as we go through this disruptive time. Because the world that we know 3 years from now will look very, very different than the world we see today in ways that we just don't even know yet. And so as you enter into that, I ask that you would consider, what are the ways that I can do it with great grace? And finally, obedience. We talked about this earlier. This is what Daniel had to do. You know, I think a lot of times we take in information, spiritual information, and we go, God, thanks for telling me that. And then we don't do it, right? Because it's hard to do what God tells us, because most of the time, the spiritual thing, the right thing, is also a very hard thing. And so obedience-based discipleship, learning to become more like Jesus as we obey him in the very next step. As you go through your day, the world of AI is changing so quickly that when you wake up in the morning and you're scrolling through your feed, you're going to see something, you're like, oh my goodness, what are the implications of that? By noon, when you have a meeting, there's going to be a whole new set of implications. And by dinner, when you're recapping on the news or talking with your family, there might be a whole new set of implications. This means that you have to have step-by-step obedience with God as you wrestle with this. It's not something, we've kind of gotten used to just checking in with God once in a while and then saying, God, I got this. It's so easy in the Christian faith to do that. This is going to be a time when that is insufficient. It always was insufficient, but it will be even more so because of the amount of disruption that we're going to be facing. So there's two conversations I'd like to encourage you to have with your families, your friends, your staff, your teams, your churches in the next few weeks. One is a question that seems a little silly. Who are we and what is our purpose? That question is all about what does it mean to be human? Because fundamentally, the disruption around AI and the new innovations that are going to come are going to have to do with what is it that is truly human? And what are the things that we can have machines do? We've been wrestling with this for years and years and years, but it hasn't been so significant. It hasn't been so dramatic. It's now becoming real, like it talks to you real, right? Before it was just, some website you went to and you got new information. That was great. Now it's becoming real in a way that just means we're going to have these discussions in a more intentional way. And I think in many ways, our inventiveness has gotten ahead of our moral frameworks. We are more inventive than we are prepared to have these conversations. And so we need to address that. But each of you can, by having these conversations, again, with your family, with your friends, your churches. The next one is discernment. Because of the amount of disruption that's going to come, and because of the cool things that we're going to get to wrestle with, we're going to have to daily make decisions. Do I do that? Do I not do that? What are the conditions that I do that under, right? The amount of discernment required, the amount of small decisions with big impacts is going to be significant. And so your spirit-led decision-making skills are going to be really, really critical. Well, how do you build spirit-led decision-making skills? You understand the situation, you understand your times, you pray, and you obey. And you rinse and you repeat. And you do it over and over and over again. You do it with the littlest little thing, and then a bigger thing, and then a bigger thing. One of the things I noticed in Daniel is this first big dream that Daniel had to interpret from God to the king was actually a softball, right? I mean, this was a good news story for Nebuchadnezzar. He was actually the hero of that dream. He was going to live his whole life and be in an amazing place. Did you notice how Daniel, as he gets further along in his career, God asks him to interpret harder and harder dreams, to the point where at one point he was saying, tomorrow you'll be dead, was the dream he had to interpret, or the writing on the wall, if you remember. Well, God's the same way. He starts us off with little things, and he gives us bigger and bigger things as he shows that we're being obedient in understanding, praying, and obeying, right? And so as you wrestle with this whole area of AI, Take advantage of the chance to be obedient in the little things. Because at some point, the AI revolution and the disruption that we're going to see is going to ask some really big things of you. And are you spiritually mature enough to be able to engage at that level? So these are the two conversations. So I rewrote the sweetness test, but I only had to change one word. So I changed just the word in front of sweet. When you see something that is humanly sweet, go ahead and do it. What do I mean by that? Well, we're created in the image of God. We as humans, if we're flourishing, it's because God is seeing things happen in our lives. We're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. If we see people flourishing, we see people that have right relationships with their family, friends, with God, etc. Well, if you see that AI is helping someone flourish in a meaningful way, then implement it, do it, use it. It's a wonderful way to use that technology. That's what we're doing in SIL. We're finding ways that AI can help save minority languages that without some of this technology, those languages might go extinct. And so there's huge potential to help people flourish. A language dies every 40 days. I don't know if any of you knew that. Every 40 days we lose one of the world's 7,000 plus languages. And AI is going to be a huge part of saving many of those languages. All right, the way I'd like to end is by going to the prayer that Daniel prayed in chapter 2 when he got the answer. Can you imagine how he must have felt waking up from his sleep or however it happened, and he had the interpretation? He went, man, my life has now just been spared because I have this information. So I want to read this prayer, and I wonder if you would just close your eyes, bow your heads, and listen to my words. Just listen to the prayer, and imagine how this might apply as you're engaging around decisions around AI. So here's what Daniel prayed. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises others up. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. My prayer for you is that as you understand, pray, and obey, that God will give you the insights that you need to do the ministry that he's put in front of you to do this day, this month, this year. So blessings to all of you.